going to start.
Good morning. My name is Peter. I'm a recovered alcoholic.
Hey, Peter.
Grateful to be alive and sober and part of a sacred place called Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm glad some of you guys came back after last night. It's really good to be here. God separated me from alcohol on June 23rd, 1988. I'm a recovered alcoholic, and I'm grateful for that gift. I remember coming to these deals when they were over at St. John's, and it was a guy, Bart, who was running the show. And the first time I ever came, I didn't know what they were, and Don P. and Jerry Elkins were doing it. And I got to see them a couple of times, and then I watched Mark and Joe H., Mark H. and Joe H. do these things. And I would sit there in awe of how these men can talk about this information with great passion and conviction. And I had passion and conviction, but how do you get to that place? And it isn't such a big leap. It just requires being disciplined to the spiritual life. As far as speaking, that's a whole other deal. That's God's job. But to live that life, I had to be willing to surrender. And a handful of years ago, Bart gave me a call to do one of these deals with the gentleman from California, Hector E., and the Raymer Boys. And that sounds really Texas, the Raymer Boys. And me. And I was excited to do it, but I was really more excited because I felt like I was following my elders in carrying the torch, which is a responsibility we all have. We were talking over dinner last night, and Mick was saying there's a lot of young folks in this group, and there's a lot of new folks coming into Alcoholics Anonymous, and those of us who've been around have to carry the torch. So I did that, and I came back again a few years later. This is my third fellowship of the Spirit in Queens, and my feelings about it are still the same, but I think my approach is different. A little older and hopefully a little bit wiser in doing these things in my life in general. And so I'm really glad to be here and get to share. And I always like to start these things with either a prayer or some consideration. And I just want to start with this, and we'll get into reviewing last night. Last night we were talking about unmanageability and who's going to manage our life. And one of the things when we're living in the world of the Spirit, things start to unfold. Things have unfolded for me. And we start to live along the lines of, a life along the lines of spiritual lines. And I just want to share this with you. It says, people are often unreasonable and self-centered. Forgive them anyway. If you are kind, people may accuse you of ulterior motives. Be kind anyway. If you're honest, people may cheat you. Be honest anyway. If you find happiness, people may be jealous. Be happy anyway. The good you do today may be forgotten tomorrow. Do good. Give the world the best you have, and it may never be enough. Give your best anyway. For you see, in the end, it is between you and God. It was never between you and them anyway. That's really raising the bar. Because how often, we're in Alcoholics Anonymous and we give the talk and we want feedback as soon as we're done. And it's always about representing or presenting this false self to other people because there's a motive of me getting well. And if no one's around, I don't do so well. How am I doing, as I said last night, when I'm all alone? And am I trying to do good because I'm afraid of the consequences? Or am I doing good because I've been changed, I've been transformed? So if I come up to a red light at maybe 2 o'clock in the morning, and it's a really long red light, and I want to get home, and I live a block away, and there's no cops around, I say, I can take this light right now. And if you're from Brooklyn or Queens, that's a regular occurrence. Right? And there's no cops around, and I really am tired. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. I want to get home. Who's going to know? But I'll probably get a ticket because I know there's a cop behind the tree there. So you wait, and you begrudgingly, and then you wait for the green, you go through. Same scenario. 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm tired. I come up to a light. It's a red light, and I wait. and then it turns green and I go. And the difference between the two is, one, I'm doing good really because I'm afraid of the consequences if I do bad, and the other one is I do good because that's the way I've been made. One is the transformation, one is compliance. And so how am I doing in Alcoholics Anonymous currently? Am I saying the right things? Am I trying to do the right thing because I'm afraid of what people are going to think of me? Or have I been transformed that this big book has become part of my beingness? It's who I be. Last night we talked about the unmanageability, current unmanageability, which in order to have some sort of okayness with me, again, it's about me surrendering and being disciplined to this spiritual life. In 43 pages, they talk about the phenomenon called craving. They talk about the mind in chapter 3. That I have a mind that'll take me back to that which is killing me. And once I pick up a drink, the phenomenon called craving kicks in. And then I stop drinking and I get sober, and that doesn't mean my life is manageable. I've just removed the symptom of a greater problem. Bill uses the word root and branch. I could see a tree, we can chop the tree down, but the roots can go a block away. So I need to go down and get to causes and conditions. If not, all I'm doing is walking around Alcoholics Anonymous without a drink in me, and this illness will go underground and resurface in other areas that call sprees. And I will go on the food sprees, and the sex sprees, and the money sprees, and the lying sprees, and the fear sprees, and the spree. And I remerge remorse with the firm resolution not to do that again. I want to experience God so I can tell you about it, or because it's the last rung on the ladder and I got nothing else, there's nothing else but that. And that gift of desperation is about me grabbing onto something other than me and other people, no human power to experience God. Interesting thing happens to me as we're kind of moving along through this work and we're starting to get awakened. We start to bear witness for those who are lost. I was seeking God, God's seeking me. God's seeking out me to find me and to save me, and He gives me this incredible gift, and my job is to go out and bring God's kids back to Him. Go out and get the lost sheep and bring them home, and it's part of our primary purpose. Stay sober and help another alcoholic recover from alcoholism. Go get God's children. It's no longer about me and Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm certainly not the most important member of Alcoholics Anonymous. We're in a home group. So we start going through the steps, and life seems to get manageable, and hopefully we're really looking at the core for me of unmanageability is not knowing what the day's going to look like when a drink shows up and I go drink and I can't stop. I wake up at 8 o'clock in the morning looking to go to work, and at 10 o'clock I'm in the bar or in a liquor store. How this happened, that wasn't the plan. And trying to outthink my own mind is futile. Trying to remember where I come from, play the tape through, remember where I come from, keep it green. All those things are futile because I'm trying to use a sick mind to overcome a sick mind, and I get drunk. It's when I'm out of me, there's nothing left, there's no self-reliance, that I reach on to someone else, a sponsor who takes me, drives me back to God, and that is the power of the spiritual airbag that keeps me from drinking. And that for me is the core of unmanageability, but we got this other piece. And last night I think I was talking about getting all the ducks in a row. And life becomes my master, and I'm headed for trouble if I do. Here's a consideration. Even though we move forwards through the steps 1 through 12, is it possible I can start going backwards through the steps? I'm not really sponsoring anyone. I practice these principles in my affairs when it looks good for me. Other than that, I don't. I'm a drunk. I'm running around AA like a drunk without a drink in me. I'm not helping anyone. I occasionally make meeting just to see some of the guys. Meditation is the first practice that goes by the wayside. That's non-existent. Or what I hear a lot, I meditate when I'm driving to work. Stay off the road if you're doing that, right? Very dangerous, right? Oh, I pray on my way to work. That's all great for praying on your way to work, because I do that. I talk to God in the car. But the prayer should be something sacred where I'm giving attention to this power who's giving me everything. Let me set aside some time for this, to worship my Creator, to listen in meditation. But that kind of goes by the board because I have to pick out the right clothes and I got things to do. And I have to go on that famous website, make sure everyone likes me today before I check in with God, right? Make sure I post all my pictures before I seek my Creator, right? There's no nightly review, and I'm walking around without a 10-step. In fact, I'm starting to blame other people. As far as making amends quickly, that's out. I have unfinished amends that I'm not making, and because it's a long time ago, besides I feel good, and I started to worship my emotions. I started to worship my mind. I started to worship me because now I'm God. Defects of character starting to run the show again, and I deny them. In fact, I get used to them. I point out your defects, but I have none. I haven't written inventory in God knows how long, and that turning it over, I'm turning everything back to me because I'm God. So there's no more decision. That's gone. I'm running my life again. Insane thoughts start to show up. It may not be a drink, but it's the sprees. I have very inappropriate behavior that if he or she found me, I'd probably get divorced. If my boss find out, I get fired. And I'm living in a world of unmanageability. I've become agnostic, I'm in self-reliance, and I have fear. It's this vicious cycle. Current agnosticism, unmanageability, self-reliance, fear. Fear. Current agnosticism, self-reliance, and it's just unmanageable. It's just this vicious cycle, and I'm looking for comfort somewhere. In fact, I demand people give me comfort because I'm not walking around with an okayness in here. And then I pick up a drink. Whether that takes a month, a year, a couple of years, I start to trickle backwards through the steps, and everyone wonders, how did that happen? Including me, who's drunk. So even though I'm moving through the steps, what am I doing to grow in understanding and effectiveness and make sure that God's managing my life? And what we have are sponsors to make sure we're doing that, to hold us accountable. Cunning, baffling, and powerful, and very patient. The book uses the terms a subtle foe. Subtle is sly, clever, and devious and difficult to detect. I can't see my ears. You can. I can't see my illness. You can. And so I think I'm just moving along great, and I'm not doing so good. On page 34 in the big book, it says this. Whether such a person can quit upon a non-spiritual basis depends upon the extent to which we have already lost the power to choose whether I will drink or not. So what that's telling me, if I've lost the power to choose, which means I don't have choice or control, I need a spiritual way of living or else. And if I'm going to put the plug in a jugger and survive on that, I'm probably not the person on page 21, the real alcoholic. And I can use me to keep me sober. I can rely upon the fellowship to keep me sober. I don't really need to go to some of the any lengths that some of us have to go in seeking this power called God. I don't drink, go to meetings, play sober softball, I go to sober bowling, I do all these wonderful things, I'm at all the parties, I'm at group anniversaries, I'm giving away chips and people think I'm something, including me, but I don't need to do inventory. But if I'm the guy on page 21, the real alcoholic who suffers from a lack of power, choice, control in the mind before I drink, and a lack of power, choice, control in the body once I pick up a drink, because once I pick up one, I want two. And there's no way out of that. Step one tells me I'm drinking. It doesn't care. 43 pages tell me I am drinking, regardless of length of time of sobriety. And even though life looks good on the outside, I'm still alcoholic and still broken and sick, and I will trickle back to a drink. So what am I going to do? The book uses the word, it says, what's our choice to be? I think our book is being very kind when they say that in seeking this power. What choice? Drink and die or find God? I think about some of the any lengths I went to hustle up money for a drink. Some of the any lengths I went to when I was involved with dry goods, going into neighborhoods I didn't know, stealing, doing all sorts of illegal things. That's in any lengths. If I'm capable of doing that, I'm capable of doing any lengths in here. It's just I don't want to. Do I worship my emotions? Do I worship feeling good? Because we start to feel good in Alcoholics Anonymous. I did after a while. I start to feel good. I like the effect produced by people liking me and feeling good. And I use that as my barometer for my spiritual condition. And I'm in for a rude awakening because at some point I go home and I'm all alone. How do? I wrestle on my pillow at night. Right? So it's this forward journey backwards to our Creator to get to a place of purity, honesty, unselfishness, and love. But then I need to continue to grow in understanding and effectiveness. Step one says we're powerless over alcohol. I don't have choice. I hear lots of folks sometimes saying I have a choice, or my drug of choice was, there is no such thing as choice. If I still have choice, perhaps I'm not a real alcoholic. I don't have power. Once I have one, I have two, and then I go on drunks. With the firm resolution, I'm going to stop drinking tomorrow, but I'm going to have a drink to figure out how not to drink. I don't know if anyone identifies with this. You know when you're going to go out drinking? Wherever you're going to go out drinking, what do you do before you go out drinking? You go to the liquor store and start drinking to go out drinking. And once I start, I continue. Doctor's opinion talks about this phenomenon called craving, where for me as an alcoholic, my craving was always intensified, never satisfied. And that means all other sprees I go on, there's no such thing as one for me. And even with the powerful desire and a firm resolution never to drink again, I go back to drinking over and over and over again. And it's until I start to experience that place of desperation and willing to do anything. One of the questions all my sponsors have always asked me, are you willing to go to any lengths? Or has any lengths become my any lengths rather than what the sponsor tells me? In fact, any lengths is really none of my business. I just have to be in a spirit of willingness. And with a mustard seed of willingness, we can move a mountain. So how willing are we? How willing am I? How willing am I now with 26 years sobriety? Do I think maybe I don't need to write inventory because things are pretty good right now? Am I still willing to go to any lengths? Do I still seek this power with the desperation of a drowning man? Currently, how am I doing? So 43 pages drive us into a corner. They tell me over and over and over again that I'm going to drink regardless of my best intentions. And once I'm at that jumping off place, then what? Well, they offer us, they point us to a solution in step 2. That at some point I'm going to get to a place of sanity, wholeness of mind, truth, and God, where I get this renewed mind through the death of self, a God mind. And I start to see what God's eyes, I start to hear what God's ears. Hopefully the words I'm speaking are God's words, because my beingness has been changed from the inside out. Who I be on the inside, this God starts manifest out there. And then we bear witness, and we wait at the door for the next one. But there's some work to do. There's some requirements. The book requires me to do certain things. Decision in 3 and 4 through 9. And at some point, my book guarantees me I enter the world of the Spirit. The awakening's happening. And now it's about growing in understanding and effectiveness.
Thank you, Peter. My name's Mickey. I'm an alcoholic. Here we are in Queens. Aren't we lucky? Aren't we lucky? You know, we could be doing anything with our Saturday. It's our Saturday. God give it to us. So we could be anywhere doing anything. But we've chosen to be here together in the fellowship of the Spirit to seek solution. Right? And I know this is going to sound like, I don't know, but it's really great that they put numbers on the steps. Do you know what I mean? All the actions are essential, but what they're trying to do is build us towards something that we can hang on to. And one of the things I wanted a spirituality that I could stand on, like this floor. I told you last night I was afraid that spirituality was fairy tales, and what was happening to me was real, and it was eroding and corroding my life, and I wanted something that I could stand on, and I could trust, and I could hopefully move forward. I learned about the drinking part of alcoholism. I learned everything about alcoholism in here. I just knew I was sick, and I knew I was facing the wrong direction. I was seated on the horse backwards, and we were going 99 miles an hour. And so to find out that this is a disease and that I have it, and that something can be done about it, because here's the deal. I shared with you last night what it was like for me to be in a satellite office of a hospital trying to seek help. And it's not that woman didn't really mean to help me. She just didn't know what I had, and I didn't know what I had. And I thought, and they kept using longer names. Have you ever noticed that? What's wrong with me? Well, you got a bip, 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 bip. Now you show up 3 weeks later, and a bip, 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 you know what I mean? And here's another pill, and you know. if you talk to my head, we are not going to get there. Because, as Don used to say, I'm rubber-minded. I can take any thought and I can twist it to my own hurt. Okay, so if you keep talking to my head, I'm not going to get anywhere and you're going to waste your time. But if you talk to my heart, I will latch on, even though it's wounded, even though it's hurt. My heart will reach out. So these guys that came and 12-stepped me in our home were talking about the one guy woke up in a jail in Tennessee accused of the murder of his wife and didn't know if he'd done it. Now, I didn't do that. But there was something in his heart in my house that touched me. And while he was talking, I kept praying, please, God, give me alcoholism. Because he said you can get well from alcoholism. And I was on a one-way ticket, and it was always getting worse. You know, we have that joke in here. Did you hear that? And we all laugh, and it's like this. I used to go into buildings, and I could hear the alarm. The guy says, you can't hear that. That's above where a dog can hear it. Man, I could hear it. I could hear things, and it was like really there. The alarm was really there. It was this high-pitched deal, and I was getting messages from Mars, man. I was in primo shape. So when you find out that there's a disease that has all of these things, and it's like Medusa, you know, that Greek goddess with the snakes, okay? It's like that. It's like, I'm like schizophrenic. I'm like neurotic. I'm like psychotic. I'm like, bipolar. I'm like all of that. And a doctor wants to treat all the heads. Do you see what I'm saying? And the more they try to treat the heads, the more they dull me to what I really have. Leave me with my symptoms, please. Leave me with my symptoms because they're going to drive me to God. Does that make any sense? Okay. So, the first step is we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. The second step is we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Einstein said you cannot go to the same level of thinking that created the problem to solve the problem. You have to go above that to a higher level. Okay, so now I'm seeking a resource. I don't have to call it God. I prefer, in working with people, that they don't go to quantum physics. And I've had that happen. And that means that this is a very smart person who is dying. But I would submit, and we can certainly debate this in the breaks, that quantum physics is not going to hear me at 3 o'clock in the morning when the woogies come. Quantum physics is not going to reach in when I say, please, will you remove this corrosion in my spirit that's killing me? I need some kind of a force that can hear me and, equally importantly, talk to me. I'll give you an example of my relationship with my higher power. I'm driving across this damn road, beautiful, water on the other side and everything, and years ago, and I'm saying, God, I really want to be an artist. I want to be an artist. And what's happening? What's going on here? I'm not an artist. And this is what I got back from this higher power in my ear. Mickey, it would be helpful if you would buy some paints and brushes. Swear to God. I thought, there's a thought. I'm serious. That literally happened to me. Go buy some paint and brushes, which I did. All right. Okay. Where am I? Okay, I'm lost in the book. Chapter 4, we agnostics. In the preceding chapters, you've learned something of alcoholism. We hope we have made clear the distinction between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic. If when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, or if when drinking you have little control over the amount you take, you're probably alcoholic. I like it because it's not rocket science. If you can't control alcohol and it controls you, you're probably alcoholic. If that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. To one who feels that he is atheist or agnostic, such an experience seems impossible, but to continue as he is means disaster. Pardon me. Especially if he's an alcoholic of the hopeless variety. And I'm thinking to myself, is there any other variety? Somebody told me early on in sobriety that the big book is understatement. Okay, understated. It's understated. So when they throw in a word like hopeless, they're screaming at us. Hopeless. To be doomed, I love it, here we are. To be doomed to an alcoholic death or to live on a spiritual basis are not always easy alternatives to face. Okay. Spirituality or death? I don't know. It's right? But it isn't so difficult. About half our original fellowship were of exactly that type. At first, some of us tried to avoid the issue, hoping against hope we were not true alcoholics. I told you I tried to do the shake and fake and get out of here, because if it's like going to rely on God, I'm gone. But after a while, we had to face the fact that we must find a spiritual basis of life or else. Perhaps it's going to be that way with you. Here's one of my favorite phrases in the big book. But cheer up. Something like half of us thought we were atheists or agnostics. Our experience shows you need not be disconcerted. If a mere code of morals or a better philosophy of life were sufficient to overcome alcoholism, many of us would have recovered long ago. But we found that such codes and philosophies did not save us, no matter how much we tried. We could wish to be moral. We could wish to be philosophically comforted. In fact, we could will these things with all our might, but the needed power wasn't there. Our human resources, as marshaled by the will, were not sufficient. They failed utterly. Lack of power, that was our dilemma. We had to find a power by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves, obviously. But where and how were we to find this power? Well, that's exactly what this book is about. Right? I was looking for power. I was looking for power in a bottle of alcohol. And it was very powerful. It moved me. It moved me. Now, when you take that person and you bring him in here, what am I looking for when you use the word power? I'm looking to get drunk. I didn't meditate for 30 years in this program because I kept waiting to be blissed out when I meditated. I want angels. Bare minimum 2. What do you think, 2? I'm getting nothing. I got monkey mind. It's jumping from branch to branch. I'm looking at the wiring schematic for our home. How can this fix me? Well, if I forget to say it later, the mere obedience of me sitting my rear end in that chair for 15 minutes the first thing in the morning and making myself available to God as the first fruits of my day is sufficient. Whatever happens inside of my mind, I'm trying to be obedient to the gifts that God has given me, right? So we're going down this road, and I looked at it and I thought, another thing with God, and of course, isn't it interesting? I'm saying to myself, there is no God, and then I'm cursing him. Well, that's another part, is that the God I had sent people like me to hell. This is very difficult to go to that God and say, can you work out a plan for me that's going to keep me alive and make me happy? So they said I could have any God I wanted. And I am a very literal person. Any God I want, right? So when I don't know if this is even going to make any sense, but when I got sober, all right, I was told that psychologists say, I don't know how they would know this, but it's good for an illustration, that a baby laying in a crib sees this and does not know that it's connected to this. That is my whole life when I got here. I didn't know anything was connected to anything. I didn't know the world had, like, they call it the Big Bang Theory. That was like all of life to me just went out like that. And I didn't know any connection. So I wrote down on a piece of paper, I want a God who understands and help me understand the connection between things, between me and you, between going to work and getting money, between loving my wife and staying home, between loving my daughter and being around, between doing the work and getting well. Do you understand? It wasn't like this God with a Mercedes Benz. It was like I need help at a basic level. And it took a long time for me to understand. Marie used to have long hair, and I used to braid her hair, and I loved braiding, and I love looking at braids. Why? Because it's all connected. That is the most esoteric nonsense anybody ever threw out at a meeting, but that's the way it was. It was difficult being me. And I was afraid. I was afraid that God that was going to send me to hell was going to show up again. So that's where I started on this trip. I want to see if I have any. It says in here on page 46, much to our relief, we discovered we did not need to consider another's conception of God. Our own conception, however inadequate, was sufficient to make the approach and to effect a contact with Him. As soon as we admitted the possible existence of a creative intelligence, a spirit of the universe underlying the totality of things, we began to be possessed of a new sense of power and direction, provided we took other simple steps. We found that God does not make too hard terms with those who seek Him. To us, the realm of the Spirit is broad, roomy, all-inclusive, never exclusive or forbidding to those who earnestly seek. It is open, we believe, to all men. So, when therefore we speak to you of God, we mean your own conception of God. So, I was sitting with Bob O on the front steps of 1311 York Street, and I was pretty much about 6 months sober, and I'd been trying to do this thing, and we were 12-stepping this guy, and, I was giving myself goosebumps. I was good, And he got up, and then Bob and I sat there for a while and discussed the relative merits of suicide. And this guy walked by, and I realized something surfaced. I was 6 months sober, and this thing surfaced in my head like a loaded gun. And I didn't realize I'd been carrying it for 6 months. And here's what surfaced. Mickey, this time it will be different. And it scared me. And this guy walked by, and I was really afraid of him. He was a giant, this guy. And he walked by, and he lived right next door, and I said, can I talk to you? And he said, yeah. We went next door to his apartment, and he took me through the first 3 steps. And so he asked me the questions about the first step, and I answered in the affirmative all of the things that he said. He said, Mickey, do you believe that there's a power greater than you? And I knew this was a program of rigorous honesty, so I said, no, I do not. And he said, and he knew his book, and he said, Mickey, are you willing to believe that there's a power greater than yourself? And I said, no, I am not. And he said, Mickey, are you willing to pretend that there may be a power greater than you? I said, yes. He said, that's step 2. Let's move on. You're up. There we go. Nice, huh?
For me, the most powerful line in the book, and I speak for myself, is on page 45, where it says, "Lack of power was our dilemma." And that sums up everything for me. And I was shown how I reverse that, which means with power, no dilemma. Well, where do I find this power? And my chapter 4 tells me where, how, and even why to find the power greater than myself. Deep down within, lay aside prejudice. When I see it working for you, you bear witnessing for me. I have no choice but to latch on to what you're doing. And it illustrates some stories with that. If I go back to page 24 for a moment, this is what I look like. This is what I look like when I'm the power and I'm running the show trying to stay away from a drink. It says, at a certain point in the drinking of every alky, we pass into the state where the most powerful desire to stop drinking is of absolutely no avail. Then it says, the fact is that most alkies, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. My so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. I'm unable at certain times to bring into consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. I'm without defense against the first drink. When I skip down to the bottom of the page, it says, when this sort of thinking is fully established in someone like me, I place myself beyond human aid, which means no human power could relieve me of my alcoholism. And in that human power, I put the job, I put the money, I put property and prestige, I put anything other than God. Anything I put before God, I lose anyway. Right? It says these stark and ugly facts have been confirmed by legions of alkies throughout history, but for the grace of God, there would have been thousands more convincing demonstrations. And when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm staying sober. I'm not doing much, but I'm staying sober on grace, which is God's gift for being one of His children. But there's a big difference between getting grace and experiencing that power, which gives me grace. And that's what the steps allows us to do, is experience that power, oneness with that power. And I get to look, as I'm going through the steps, my effort to live life on self-will. That's how I live. It's a state of consciousness in which I'm living, and the external world owns me. And I fall prey to misery to how everyone's doing today, how my job is doing, all our external conditions, my feelings, my emotions, all of it. When our book says we're rocketed into this fourth dimension of existence, I'm going past the obsessions, compulsions, and my emotions, which dominated me, the external world. So I need power to get past that. I need power to stay sober, because on my own power, I can't. I fail miserably at anything in life for that matter. Sometimes we're not even aware of our conscious contact and constant contact with God. And Marion called me on it. I wasn't realizing what I was doing. And I don't say this to separate myself. It's just where I've been made. So I'm getting dressed to go to a meeting, and she hears me saying, okay, God, what are we going to wear tonight? Okay, God, what should I do now? I'm I'm talking to myself. And but there's a dialogue, and as I don't realize I'm saying it, but what do I wear tonight? I get in the car and go to the meeting. Okay, God, let's go nice and easy. Let's get to our meeting. And before I get out of the car, a lot of us drive up to the meeting, bolt out of the car, run into the meeting. We walk in and we're, cut off 30 people on the way, curse people on 95 down south, gossiping in the car, jump out of the car, run into the meeting. As soon as you walk in, you're tranquil. And I have a thing before I get out of a car. I sit and I do prayer, even for a regular meeting or when I'm asked to do this. And so Marion says, do you hear yourself talking to God? I didn't know what she meant. It's a constant and conscious contact with God, because that is the power. And when I lack that power, I start to run the show. And then I start to hurt people. So my book says here that it talks about codes and philosophies. Now those things are neither good nor bad. Reading self-help books, going to a therapist, seeking out some family counseling, positive affirmations, all nice things. They're all good to have. Going to the gym to take care of my body. I'm going to turn over a new leaf. I turned over leaves every 10 minutes. I'm going to start tomorrow. All good things. They're all nice to do. But the needed power to sustain that is lacking. So I'll go to the gym for a couple of weeks. Maybe I'll pull out of not drinking for a couple of weeks. Maybe I'll start reading some self-help books or some religious books. And then I'm right back again, because my main problem centers in the mind, not the body. The body is a reaction to what the mind tells it. The body, in a sense, is a slave to the mind. My mind tells me to cheat on the wife. My mind tells me to cheat on my taxes. My mind tells me you must drink, and so I drink. I don't know if you guys could identify with this. You get out of a treatment center or you're sober for a while, and your body doesn't need alcohol. You pass a breathalyzer, you pass a UA test, you're clean and sober. Your body does not need the substance. But we're not spiritually fit. And we start to erode and we start to go sideways. And then I start thinking about a drink and I start romanticizing a drink. And at some point, even though my body doesn't physically need a drink, I feel like my body needs a drink. I've spoken to lots of dope fiends about this who are off heroin for a long time. And then they start to think about it and they feel like they're dope sick. Now, the body doesn't need it, but that's the power of the mind. It is my predator. It is my enemy. It's my lack of, my inability to see the truth in all areas of my life. Lack of power is my dilemma. So my chapter to agnostics is going to bring me to this power. It's going to deliver it for me. It's going to show me what insanity is. Repeating the same thing over, expecting different results. And it doesn't happen when I'm in the middle of a spree. It happens prior to the spree. Where I buy the lie, and the truth will always find me. The truth will always find us. Even when I was out there drinking in 1988, the truth found me. And it's sometimes when the truth finds us, it isn't always pleasant. It's incredibly uncomfortable. It's the awakening. It's the shift. And at that point, whether we're drunk and coming into AA or we bottom out in here, we're listening to a different voice. There's something different happening. And when we're hearing that voice, we're completely, as I was, out of my mind. It happened to me June 23rd, 1988, and it has happened to me many times in AA where I'm completely out of my mind and I'm hearing a different voice. And being out of our mind is a wonderful thing. I hope everyone is out of their mind and loses it forever because it's where the problems lie. We hear people say, I'm up in my head. It's where the insane thoughts are manufactured for free, willing to give it away. Right? But I return to it because our book talks about we worship our intellect. Well, it's me who's thinking of it. It must be right. So my book tells me that the great reality God is deep down within. So I have to go in order to go out. And I need to remove the things that are blocking me from this power. This arrival point came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. They're talking in past tense. They're looking back on their experience. And I look at this, I'm going to one day get to this place if I follow instructions. After identifying the problem, it's appointed to the solution. Do I want to go? Well, based on my experience, I better get going. Or I'll experience the or else once again. The great reality is deep down within, my book tells me. The power is there. This power, this God thing was with me when I was at my worst in the filthiest hallway panhandling. What I was lacking was a relationship or a oneness with God. And I look back on even the worst bottoms, how many life rafts God sent me in the form of people. How many times God interrupted my death. The guy drinking under a bridge or the woman drinking under a bridge this morning has just as much God in them as I do or we do right now. This power, and I speak for myself, my God is not a fair God that I pray to. Because if it was fair, that means all the screw-ups I did, I have no shot. I blew life up. He gave me a gift of life, and I dumped all over it. And based on all the mistakes I've made, if it was a fair God, that means there's a standard to cross the pearly gates. To get into AA, you have to live up to a certain standard. And God loves me in my brokenness. What my God is an all-forgiving and all-loving God. That's how I got here. In fact, personally speaking, my God went to the cross for guys like me. So it's an all-loving, all-forgiving God. Do I want to experience His power? Well, let's get down to brass taxes. Based on what I've been doing thus far, my life is blowing up. I've gone through 7 treatment centers. I'm in Alcoholics Anonymous for my first 6 months, and I'm like a drunken sailor without a drink in me. I'm full of fear. I'm riddled with fear. Everything's upside down. I still have the same thinking because no one ripped out root and branch yet. I'm just going to meetings, and I'm wondering when's it going to get better. So I go from meeting to meeting to meeting and getting a quick fix in, and I'm still plotting, I'm still thinking, I'm still lying, I'm still dishonest. It's on me. And then I bottom out December 22nd, 19, I'll never forget it, and I was really thirsty that day. And I sat with the gentleman, I went to his house, and he says to me, after I told him my tales of woe, I love to tell the story. You know how newcomers are, right? They call you, you say hello, and that's the last thing you say for the next hour. They just keep talking. And when I came up, to catch your breath, he said, where are you with God in the 12 steps? I says, when do you start the steps? And he says, when you stop throwing up, you're late. I didn't care for the answer he gave me. I wanted some sort of hug, and let's go to page 449 and read about acceptance, and let's go to the diner and drink a lot of coffee. He didn't do that. And he told me that you need to get a power call God. I said, I believe in God, but you don't have a relationship with God. You're not experiencing oneness with God. You still have duality. There's God and fill in the blank. So there's great realities deep down within, and I realize, and as I start to move through this work, and step 2 is just a point, it's a conclusion of the mind, that everything I think is God is not, because it's coming from the same sick mind that creates problems. Everything my mind tells me is God is not. Now, I was a guy who wasn't too thrilled about God, even though I was leaning and begged towards Him. But I still had these old perceptions and conceptions, and that's where the difficulty with me towards God was. And then our elders were wonderful. They said, are you willing to grow towards? I said, yes. Do you go to AA meetings? Yes. Isn't it a GOD, a group of drunks for good oral direction? And I couldn't deny the power that I felt when I walked into a meeting. Sitting with the old timers, hoping some of that would rub off. When they remembered your name, it was a great thing. You'd sit down, have coffee, and they'd give you little instructions. And I run to that meeting to see those old timers. Guys like Jim Laffey back in Brooklyn, and Chuck Rice, who just passed away out in Minnesota. And some of these icons, for me in AA, my heroes. That was the group of drunks for good oral direction. And they showed me that is your mustard seed of willingness to listen to something else other than you. And what did I have to do? Lay aside prejudice and express a willingness to believe was how. I'm working with someone, sponsoring this guy a bunch of years ago. A fellow from Russia. He's about 6'12" by 6'12". His hands were as big as this big book. I mean, he was an intimidating guy, and he did a lot of bad things in his life. And he was in this country now, and he was a drunk, and he couldn't stay sober. And he came to me, and I started working him through step 1, and we got to step 2. We got to chapter 2, agnostics. And on page 45, they introduce us to this power, step 2. And I remember him, he kind of got this wall around him, and there was something going on, and I start to read that it is open, we believe, to all men, that God doesn't make too hard terms to those who seek Him. And I start to read that paragraph, and this monster of a guy begins to weep. See, God will cut right through everything to get one of His children. So He had all these misbeliefs, all these conceptions, all these perceptions on his not being worthy to experience God. And I read this. He never saw it before and began to weep. He said, I never thought I'd have a chance with God. And that would crack the egg. We moved to the work, and this guy would go down to South Brooklyn with his big book under his arms on fire. And he helped a lot of folks in his community who were trying to get sober. It's the power of God. Came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to wholeness of mind, not only with the drink, but in every other area of my life. Because I'm sober, it doesn't give me carte blanche to be dishonest in other areas. All means all. Turn all things into the Father of light who presides over us. All means all, not some. So, separated from alcohol a few years now, my mind is still the predator. It is still the enemy, and I don't invite it in anymore. But what most of us do is we invite the mind in where all the defects are warehoused, the ego has free room and board, has a martini on the beach, and we entertain that and we let them in day after day. And on Monday they come in, my mind comes into my life, rips me off, hurts my family, takes everything that is personal to me and leaves. And on Tuesday he knocks on the door, he says, oh come on, and it won't be that bad today. He had a bad day. And I keep worshiping my mind, even though I'm claiming God with my lips, and I waver. I'm double-minded. At an AA meeting, it's God. Out there, it isn't. It's self-reliance. And it's total dishonesty. And I get pushed around like the wind pushes the waves. I'm going this way and I'm going that way. Am I committed to this power and willing to go to any lengths, whatever that looks like, to restore to wholeness of mind? I go down to the beach a lot. And God gave me a place to live literally across the street from the beach. So we go down there a lot. So I go down to the beach, and Mary and I put our chair here. And then we go out in the water. It looks pretty calm. Doesn't look like the currents are too strong. And we play around the water for a while. We catch some waves and just have a few laughs. It's great, right? And then I get tired, and so we start to come back. And as we turn around to look for the beach chairs, we don't see them. And they're way over there because we drifted. Just a little push, a little push. You don't feel it, just a little drift, a little drift, a little drift. And you turn around and I can't find my home. It's a great song. I don't know, it's 10 years after I'm Missing Lake and Palm. I can't find my way back home. Can't find it. It's a subtle push, which is what happens in here. A little self-reliance gives permission for more self-reliance, which begets more self-reliance, and a little dishonesty. It's not too bad because I can be a little dishonest. Don't you be dishonest because I sponsor you, but I can be a little dishonest. And little by slowly, and then one day life hits because life is problematic. Things happen, or the good thing happens. I come into a windfall of money, and I'm feeling really unsettled, and I don't know where I am. I'm completely lost. And I've been made abundantly clear because my track record is so brutal that when things go bad, I want relief. And it's usually a Mr. Boston Blackberry brandy, and insanity is back again. And I pick up a drink after X amount of years sobriety. I go on the sex spree after being abstinent. I go on the food spree, the money spree, or the fear spree, or the thinking spree, just some spree, because I cannot be present and mindful here with you, oh my God. It's way too painful. I hurt again, and I know what to do with hurt. I seek relief, and it isn't good for me, and it usually infects other people. Right? So our book is setting us up here to turn this back to God. Because based on my own experience, I can't run the show. Lack of power is my dilemma. I had to find a power by which I could live. Not stay away from a drink only, but to live. Because I got a living problem. And I can't live life on life's terms. How do we do that? Live life on life's terms. I need a drink to do that. I need a drink to breathe. I need a drink just to wake. I need a drink. Being honest is meek. Being dishonest is a man. Having lots of money is a man. Having no money is me. How do I live life on life's terms? I don't know how to do this. Since I'm this small, I thought I landed on the wrong planet. I mean, how do you do this? Life on God's terms. Challenges, yes. Any lens, yes. But how we go through it, the GPS has changed. I have one. Right? So am I being disciplined? Am I willing to be disciplined to the spiritual life? And that shows up in the depth of my willingness manifested in my actions. When my sponsor says, I want you to do this, I do it. Even though I think my sponsor's loony, I do it. A byproduct of that is a spirit of humility, which is kind of, for me, synonymous with experiencing God. They go hand in hand. I don't need to tell you I'm in the big book. I don't need to tell you how much I pray. I don't need to do any of that stuff. It should be the first time I came to fellowship with the Spirit, and I met Don P. for the first time, and he was standing there in the handshaking line, and I just looked in this man's eyes, and I wanted to dive in because I wanted what he had to offer. He didn't say much. He told stories for a weekend. But his beingness spoke volumes for me. Maybe other people felt different. So one of my prayers is to allow me to bear witness of this great power to someone who's lost. But Got to get to a place of willing to go to any lengths and seek this power in step 2, the pointer to the solution.
Thanks, Peter. We needed to ask ourselves but one short question. Do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe, that there's a power greater than myself? As soon as a man can say that he does believe, on 47 we are, or is willing to believe, we emphatically assure him that he's on his way. It has been repeatedly proven among us that upon this simple cornerstone, a wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built. That was great news to us, for we had assumed we could not make use of spiritual principles unless we accepted many things on faith which seemed difficult to believe. When people presented us with spiritual approaches, how frequently did we all say, I wish I had what that man has. I'm sure it would work if I could only believe as he believes. But I cannot accept as surely true the many articles of faith which are so plain to him. So it was comforting to learn that we could commence at a simpler level. I just couldn't do it, okay? I could not do it. I saw these people and they were faith-filled and rocking and rolling and they had all that conviction. I couldn't do it. I just looked at it. And then it goes on page 48 at the bottom and it talks about, and what we're really talking about is the battle between the head and the heart. Our hearts yearn for God. Our hearts are made for God. Our heads are trying to keep the rules and be the computer and do the thing and all of that stuff, and they're trying to get it. I want to get it. Now, if I can't get God, there must not be a God. That's how I ended up upside down. Everybody nowadays believes in scores of assumptions for which there's good evidence, but no perfect visual proof. And does not science demonstrate that visual proof is the weakest proof? It is being constantly revealed as mankind studies the material world that outward appearances are not inward reality at all. To illustrate, and think about this, to prosaic, well, I think that word prosaic means everyday, ordinary. The prosaic steel girder is a mass of electrons whirling around each other at incredible speed. These tiny bodies are governed by precise laws, and these laws hold true throughout the material world. Science tells us so. We have no reason to doubt it. When, however, the perfectly logical assumption is suggested that underneath the material world and life as we see it, there's an all-powerful, guiding, creative intelligence, right there our perverse streak comes to the surface, and we laboriously set out to convince ourselves it isn't so. Turns out that steel girder is alive. It's alive. And we have been going around getting deader and deader and deader as our disease owns us. And we use our mind to say, I'll tell you how it is. I'll tell you how it is. It's this and that and this and that. And meanwhile, I'm going south. I'm not doing well. But I'll hold on to that mind. And then comes on page 53. And it talks about the proposition of faith. So faith is believing in things unseen. All right? I was talking with somebody this morning, I think it was this morning, about gambling. Do I gamble? I don't gamble. I just bet my life. Think about it. Right? I'm not going to go down and put 25 to go into a casino with $25. I'll lose it. The odds are against me. But I will bet my life on the existence of God and it being the only way to have a life, period. One of my values when I got sober is I wanted to be married and I couldn't do it. And I had been married for 3 years. And Marie and I are married for 43 years. We're married for 43 years because of that bet. I bet my life. I will go with you, God, because I cannot do this. Powerless, I'm seeking power. Powerless, I'm seeking power. I got to keep admitting I can't do it, because if I think I can do it, I'm going to try. Why wouldn't I? And if I don't think I have a terrible, terrible problem, a radical problem, why would I seek a radical solution? Alcoholics Anonymous is a radical solution. This is counterculture stuff. How many people on your block have to completely surrender their lives to God in order to suck air? Seriously, but think about that. We're not like, again, back to that competitive thing, in my faith, I'm like what? What are you? I am sucking air because there's a God, and I decided because he gave me the power to go with him. Where are we going? Like Peter said, we're going, boss, where you're going. I'm going where you're going. Of course, I'll kick and scream all the way, but here we go. Right? Okay. Arrived at this point on the bottom of 53, and watch this. I love this. Arrived at this point. So God either is or he isn't. Fearlessly face that proposition. God either is or he isn't. Arrived at this point, we were squarely confronted with the question of faith. We couldn't duck the issue. Listen to this thing. I know we've read it. I know you've read it, but just hang out with this for a second. Okay, I'm a radical. I love what we do in here. I love that it's life and death. I love that this thing is black and white. I love that, you either do this. It's like, we're going to go to a very spiritual source, Miyagi. Miyagi says you karate yes or you karate no. You karate maybe, and you end up squished like a grape. I like that. Here we are. Why do I like it? I like it because I BS'd my entire way through life. Shake and fake. Smoke and mirrors. Incidentally, that's why I love being a bootmaker. I cannot fake it. Either the boots fit or they don't fit. They're either pretty or they're ugly. And there isn't anybody else, and I keep looking around in the shop but me. All right. Arrived at this point, we were squarely confronted with the question of faith. We couldn't duck the issue. Some of us had already walked far over the bridge of reason toward the desired shore of faith. The outlines and the promise of the new land had brought luster to tired eyes and fresh courage to flagging spirits. Friendly hands had stretched out in welcome. We were grateful that reason had brought us so far, but somehow we couldn't quite step ashore. Check this sentence. Perhaps we'd been leaning too heavily on reason that last mile, and we did not like to lose our support. So if I read this correctly, Alcoholics Anonymous is inviting us and actually directing us to be unreasonable. Right? How reasonable is it to say, God will give me work? How reasonable is it to say, God will get us through this month. We will pay our bill. Marie and I have just come through 13 years of wondering every month, are we going to be able to pay our bills? You want to hear a hell of a story. We went to do a refinance on our home. Excuse me. Whew. Damn. And I thought they're going to look at us and look at me and say, brother, there's no way we're going to do business with you. Because I've taken on so much debt trying to get the profession and buy the machinery we needed and do the things we needed to do. And I thought, we're drowning in debt. The debt service every month is beating me to death, and I can't get up. I can't get ahead, and we're always in trouble. So we paid our bills every month, P.S., for 13 years. We went to refinance our home, and the guy at the mortgage company said this. He said, Mickey, do you know what your credit score is? And I thought, man, here it comes. He said, your credit score is 811. And your wife's credit score, and I don't know how this happened, is 817. Our God is a good God. I'm talking about bread and butter, street level, good God. Getting there was a long haul. And we got the refinance, and we owe very little money now. And I can actually see about us paying it off and actually having a few bucks in our pocket. I haven't had any money in my pocket in 13 years. I got some money in my pocket now. I know it's not a lot of money, and you're not going to ever meet a rich bootmaker, but I will tell you something. It's true. But it was unreasonable that man could say to us, your credit score is. So he said, I have never worked with anyone with a credit score as high as yours. Now, I have a value. If I owe you money, I pay you money. You've supplied me with some leather for my stuff or electricity for our home. I owe you that money. You get your money first. That's the way that one works, huh? This is a love affair, this whole program. It's unbelievable. It's a love affair. And it's really hard. I don't know, maybe it isn't for you, but it's really hard for me. Every morning I wake up and there's this vulture sitting at the end of my bed. Good morning, Mickey. Here we go, brother. Let's do this thing. Oh, no, not again with the vulture. Okay. Perhaps we'd been leaning too heavily on reason that last mile, and we did not like to lose our support. So what am I going to do? Am I going to be a fool? Yes. I'm going to be a fool. I'm going to be that guy that says, this is going to happen. And I don't go around every day and saying, this is going to happen. I got no place else to go because God has minimalized my life and our lives down pretty much to, sucking air and having 3 meals and a roof over our head, for which we are grateful. So, that's what this business of faith is about. That's what this business of God is about. And I don't have to get it. The only way I would get who God is to be God. And I am most certainly not God. I'm a spark of God. I live with sparks of God. And we are here, the big book says. So if I was to ask you, incidentally, why did God make you? Why are you here? Now, I've heard people come up with the purpose for the AA group. I'm here to carry the message. I can't remember the purpose for the group, but anyway. To carry the message to the alcoholic who still suffers. I got it. Do you know what I mean? That's the purpose of the group. Why am I here? The big book actually has an answer for that. You know what the answer is? I am in this world to play the role he assigns. He assigns a role and I go play it. And many times I'm thinking to myself, you got the right guy. Really? I'm in the role I'm in this world to play the role he assigns. And then he gives me boot making. And I'm going, you got the right guy? And then I paint these icons. I paint religious pictures, okay? I paint angels and saints. And it's like, how many people would like a really expensive picture of an angel in a 13th century art style? So he said, Mickey, I want you to do this. I'm going, really? And if he says tomorrow, Mickey, I don't want you to make boots anymore, I'll put the hammer down. Because if he doesn't come first, there is no second, There is no second. It's true. Now we get down to that place, and I'm not the person who makes casual conversation, I promise you. If we're going to sit down and talk, God is going to be in there within 30 seconds. Not because I'm holy, but because I'm desperate. Peter, are there other things you would like to say about step 2?
On page 46, it says, we found that as soon as we were able to lay aside prejudice and express a willingness to believe in a power greater than ourselves, we commenced to get results. That's where we find how. On page 52, it says, when we saw others solve their problems by a simple reliance upon the spirit of the universe, we had to stop doubting the power of God. Our ideas did not work, the God idea did. And that is why. When we go to page 55, it tells us where. It says, actually we're fooling ourselves, for deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental or basic idea of God. It may be obscured or blocked by calamity, by pomp, by worship of other things, and that includes the calamity in my own head. All the traffic. Pomp. I'm better than. I don't need to do this. I don't need to surrender. I don't need to go to these drastic and revolutionary proposals. Worship of other things. Fill in the blank. Anything other than God, including my own mind. But in some form or other, it is there. For faith in the power greater than ourselves and miraculous demonstrations of that power in human lives are fact as old as man himself. And lots of times we think miracles, we have to read scripture or watch a Charlton Heston movie to see a miracle. But how many times have we walked into an AA meeting and Joe or Mary's getting a 1-year coin, and you remember when they were counting days and you didn't give them a shot because they were so banged up, and here they are making a year. Or when you're sponsoring that guy who you can't count to 10, and in 30 or 60 or 90 days they're sponsoring other people and passing on this message and bringing another child home to God. There's a miracle. We finally saw that faith in some kind of God was part of our makeup, just as much as the feeling we have for a friend. Physical extensions of that power, which is not non-physical. We have the God DNA in us, and if you can't outrun God, I can't get away from God, no matter how much I deny it or try to seek other gods. At the end of the day, God is God. That's why that returning home, that journey home, is what this process has been for me. And somewhere in this journey, I'm restored to wholeness of mind. It says he was much of fact as we were, which has, for me, been a powerful statement. God in some senses is not tangible on the front end. Let me say this, if we're disciplined to this life and we really surrender to this power, God becomes very tangible. It's no longer not tangible. And based on my spiritual conditions and a fancy word, holiness within me, we'll see God. I was with the little boy yesterday. I love children. I was with little Avery yesterday, 2 years old, and you know how they are. Every time a bus went by, it was like this new thing. He never saw a bus almost. And we waved to the bus driver, and they waved back, which is very different for being in Queens and New York, people actually waving, I wanted them to tell me I was number one, if you know what I mean. And there was a bird up in a tree, and I'm pointing to the tree, and he's... the newness, the freshness, the innocence, the perfection of this little boy, my heart melts. I see God in all of that stuff. God becomes very tangible. I just need to be awake to see that. And most of us are sound asleep, perhaps not here, but sound asleep going through life thinking we're awake. We get married sound asleep, we make love sound asleep, we go to work sound asleep, we do everything sound asleep until we wake up, and waking up is sometimes uncomfortable. But it's a get to. I get to experience God. I get to go through the steps. I get to have a sponsor. I get to write inventory. It's a get to, because the alternative is drunk and dying. This is a get to. And even when I'm sitting in an airport and there's delays and I really am frustrated and I really want to get home, or I'm stuck in Newark Airport, some other godforsaken place, it's a get to. Because I can be back in a hallway sucking on a pint of Mr. Boston Blackberry brandy, just trying to die again. It says we can only clear the ground a bit if our testimony helps sweep away prejudice. It means me telling you, illustrating my story to you. That's how it helps. I'm bearing witness the way you bear witness for me. And maybe in telling you how much I despise God, how much I want to know part of God, and how I fell in love with God in the process in between, that might bring you along. And we can stop listening to this mind, this predator, this thinking mind that is never present but always past and future. If our testimony helps sweep away prejudice, enables you to think honestly, encourages you to search diligently, or simply put, being honest, open, and willing, it says, with this attitude is a huge promise. With this attitude, I cannot fail. And then it goes on to say the consciousness of my belief, not the way someone else believes, as I was told being brought up, you have to believe in this or else. My belief is sure to come to me. There's two promises right there before we go into turning it over in step 3. If life has become my master, I'm walking right back into a suddenly. But I don't know when suddenly showing up, but it's on its way in. If life has become my master, if I've become the teacher, I'm always a teacher. I'm without a beginner's mind, without ever being a student. If I've become God, that means everyone has to do things on my terms. Life is my master, and my drink is on its way. Because someone bar stool, I heard old timers always say this. In some bar, there's a bar stool with my name on it, and a drink waiting at the bar for me, somewhere. Unless I seek this power to desperate of drowning man. Get restored to sanity. And step 3 is going to be talking about turning this all over. And it's not just about experiencing this power called God so I can keep me sober. It's about experiencing this power called God who's keeping me sober all along. But that means everything goes to God. Not just the booze problem. Everything. My money. Where I work. Everything. Everything. Everything means everything. Am I willing to do that? Well, let's take a look at step 1. Got a step 2 problem, got a step 1 problem. Got a step 3 problem, I have a step 1 problem. I have a step 9 problem, I have a step 1 problem. Coming on day 1, I'm willing to do anything you tell me. I'm in 30 days later, well, I'm not so sure. You start jumping ship, meeting different people, different meetings, different sponsors. It's always a step 1 problem. So I guess you can say I'm as horrific as my bottom was, and it's my bottom, so it's the worst in the whole world. I'm grateful for the degradation that I experience daily and the pain that I experience regularly, because it got me to the edge of a cliff where my nails were dug in, and the only power I could turn back to is, if you're out there, please take me from this. And he has embraced me and comforted me. I like the effect produced by God. So I think we'll take a little break, and we'll come back in about
10 minutes.
10 minutes. Good, thank you.